Welcome to Making Money. This is Matt McCall. Thanks for joining me. It's March 2nd, 2023. It is a Thursday morning here in South Florida. And as you can imagine, we got a big show coming up. It'll be a special show. We're going to take a look at the implications of what's going on with artificial intelligence, what's going on with ChatGPT, and which chip companies are the way to play it. Is it Nvidia? Is it AMD? Is it Intel? All that and more coming up right now on Making Money. For the first time ever, Rick Rule is partnering with Stansberry Research for a brand new project. It's unlike anything we've done in the past. And once you see what he's up to, I think it'll also be a pivotal moment for you as well. Rick joins Dan Ferris of Stansberry Research to talk about a critical turning point in the stock market, the likes of which he's not seen in 50 years of natural resource investing. And if you know how to play this opportunity, he believes you may never have to worry about money again. To hear Rick's big prediction and to get more details on his new project, head to rickrulesr.com. Again, that's rickrulesr. If you want to know all about the once-in-a-lifetime financial event Rick says is unfolding right now. Again, this is Matt McCall. Thanks for joining me. It's the 2nd of March here of 2023. It's a lot of twos and threes in there. So a lot of twos and threes happening here today. And as I mentioned, a bit of a special show where we're going to dive into a very hot topic right now. You know, really ever since we had kind of ChatGPT really storm onto the mainstream here in early 2023, we have had a lot of companies moving both up and down based off where the future of artificial intelligence is going. You know, everything from Microsoft and its big investment into OpenAI, which is the owner of ChatGPT, to Alphabet, which obviously owns Google, getting hit because some of the market was believing that they were behind Microsoft in the future of artificial intelligence and the next wave of basically search. So there's been some winners, there's been some losers. One area that really kind of fascinates me more than anything is when it comes to the semiconductors. And you know, the big semiconductor way back, for the first kind of tech bubble or rally, then bubble that we had, that was Intel. And so we had Intel was one of the biggest winners back in the 90s, into 2000. Hasn't done much since then. We're going to talk about that. But I wanted to throw Intel into the mix with the other two, what I call basically the leading players. And that's Nvidia, which is symbol NVDA, and Advanced Micro Devices, symbol AMD. These are by far the two players. I'm going to break them down as well as Intel. We're going to look at their fundamentals, look at kind of how their business is broken down, and most importantly, where I believe they're going to go in the future and a way to play the future of artificial intelligence, which I've been writing about for many, many years. It's just funny how sometimes it takes one headline to get investors excited about it again. Keep in mind, artificial intelligence, AI, is something that I've always said it's everywhere but nowhere. We're already using it so many different ways. Many companies that you do business with are using it in so many ways. You just don't really notice it on a day-to-day basis like you notice some other technologies. That being said, we are still in the very early innings, and I still think we have huge, huge upside when it comes to artificial intelligence. And I think there's a lot of great investment opportunity out there right now. And some of the big names I'm talking about, and some of the smaller names as well. So let's kind of jump into taking a look at these three companies. And let's first take a look at the market share, the market cap of where they are right now. And this is the size of the company as of heading into this week. And you can see here, Nvidia is the purple line, worth about $582 billion. So it's a very large company. Moved down, way down, $127 billion market cap, the valuation of AMD, and then Intel at 103. What you will notice, though, if you go back 10 years, this is 10 years ago, Intel was basically about the same size as it was now. That being said, you can see the rise in Nvidia and the rise in AMD along the way, moving from very, very tiny companies back then, small caps, to some of the bigger semiconductors in the world. So it's kind of just want to show the growth that we've already had in these two now larger than Intel companies, but really kind of where they were back then. Let's also now take a look at the last 10 years and the performance of the stocks and see how the stocks have done. Well, let's start at the bottom this time. Price change in the last 10 years, Intel's up 21.7%. So obviously lagging the overall market. We have AMD up over 3,100% and Nvidia up over 7,500% in the last 10 years. 10 years, obviously, we're going back to early 2013. I will say, obviously, this is very much documented, that on March 9th, 2009, the day the S&P hit 666 was the intraday low of that 0809 great financial crisis bull market. I was on Fox Business, and I put out a portfolio called the Andrew Jackson. I think it was a total of 7 or 8 stocks. You could buy one share of each for less than $20, like $19 a change. And long story short, the premise was to buy some really beaten up companies. AMD was one of those companies at the time, and split adjusted, my goodness, I don't know what it is off the top of my head because it's been so darn long, but split adjusted, I'm pretty sure it was like around $1 and change. And now we have AMD around $80 a share, as high as 160 back in November. We'll talk about that in a little bit. So we can see how really we've had the changing of the guard. We've had kind of Intel pass the baton down to AMD, and Nvidia. And we can see that in the next chart I'm going to show you here. And this is a quarterly revenue growth going back 10 years, and it's plotted. And as you can see, look how revenue has grown over that time frame. NVIDIA's revenue is up 533.8%. Advanced Micro Devices, their revenues increased by 414%. And then Intel revenue in 10 years has only increased by 11.62%. So again, I'm just kind of getting the stage set here, showing to where we've come from. And now the chart I'm going to show you here, kind of where we're going. And this is annual revenue estimates for the big three again. And you can see NVIDIA's way on top. Intel's way on top with this. But the reason for that, we'll get into in a moment, it hasn't had any growth. It's really been stagnant. And expecting to kind of dip a little bit here in 2023, pick back up in 2024, back to around $65.25 billion in sales. You can see NVIDIA, and then you can see AMD right below it. So they're fairly close, but you're seeing some really pretty big growth. And it's not showing 2025 here, but NVIDIA is actually expected to be around $44.5 billion. So it's seeing some really good growth, which would be, almost about 45% more than what AMD is pumping out, expected to pump out in revenue in 2025. So we're kind of looking in the past. We're looking in the future. And another statistic that I think is very important to look at is what's called profit margin. And margins are important because it really shows how efficient of a company you are. The better margin you're going to have, the better bottom line, better earnings per share, and most likely that drives the share price. So let's look at profit margins here for all three of these companies. And they dipped here in 2022 because I'll talk about that in a minute, why 2022 was a rough year for these companies. But NVIDIA still, even though it's up around 30% or so, dipped to 16.2%, but still has the best profit margin of the group. Intel around 12.7, and then AMD down around 5.6. And this is due to the mixture that they have of products. Again, we'll talk about that in a second. But keep that in mind that even though NVIDIA seems to be one of the more expensive of the group, its profit margin is really good, and investors do love to see that. And then finally, I'm going to show you dividend. And you're going to see something dramatic happen here. You can see Intel raised the dividend consistently for the last 10 years, and then boom, just about a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, they dramatically cut the dividend, sliced it by more than 50%. And AMD does not pay a dividend. NVIDIA pays a very tiny one, 4 cents a share. So, basically non-existent, to be honest with you, but it does pay a little. I wanted to show you this, though, because it shows that Intel slashed their dividend for the first time here. And that's troublesome, in my opinion, that you see a company that's been consistently increasing their dividend not by a lot. And people weren't really buying that stock for the income coming from the dividend. But it does say something. When you're 10 years later and all of a sudden you have to cut it, something's going on in the company at that point. So that's kind of where we stand big picture. We're just looking at the fundamentals of that and just kind of give you an idea of where we stand there. So let's break down now into Nvidia. And they're looking for some big revenue continue to come in, as I mentioned, by 2025 up to 44.6 billion. Looking to make up to $5.55 a share by 2025. Looking for average annual growth in the next couple of years. Top line revenue 19%, bottom line earnings 25%. Nice growth. The one caveat, which you have to have, and with Nvidia, whether you love it or you hate it, it is still quite a bit expensive, even though it's come down dramatically from where it was. It still has a forward PE ratio of 53 and a forward price of sales of 16. So I want to show you the chart here and show you how it's come down, and it still has a pretty big valuation, even though it's gone up in the last couple of months. So here's a chart of Nvidia. You can see it topped out back here in November of 2021, up around $345 a share. Came all the way down to 110. We're back to 237. You can see the big gap on the right-hand side on big volume. That was earnings that came out last week. So that's really propelled it to a new multi-month high. You're really actually sitting at the best level that you've seen since early April. So about a 10-month high, 10.5-month high for Nvidia. And I just mentioned, more than doubled off the low. Could it keep going? Yes. Will this company eventually be $400 or $500 a share? I do believe it will be, yes. I don't know how quickly it gets there because, again, it is not cheap at this point. However, that being said, I don't think there's any future innovation happening in this world, in the technological world, that isn't going to have Nvidia somehow being a part of it. Break it down the company a little bit. Gaming revenue, which is gaming, video gaming, makes about 45% of total revenue, and data center revenue, which is big data centers, about 41%. Then they have professional visualization revenue, 8%, automotive, 2%. And then they have basically OEMs and others make about 3%. So when you break that down a little bit differently, you take a look at compute and networking. That makes about 42% of revenue. And that's a segment that includes NVIDIA's data center platform, as well as their systems they use for artificial intelligence. That's where they have their high performance computing, their accelerated computing. It does networking, interconnected solutions. It does autonomous development agreements, autonomous vehicle solutions. So that's where cryptocurrency mining is going to fall in there as well, robotics. So really a lot of cutting edge stuff. The graphics division makes about 58% of revenue, and that includes their GPUs. So when it comes to that, that's really kind of what NVIDIA is known for. The graphic processing unit is needed for gaming, basically. Then that's where GPU comes from. Again, about 58% of that of the revenue comes from that GPU, that graphics segment. They had, as I mentioned, earnings come out just in the last week. They guided this quarter. They're currently in the first quarter of 2024. Did they have the fiscal quarter 2024, I should say. Revenue, they had their estimates to about $6.5 billion for the quarter. It's about $150 million more than the estimates were prior to that. Even though that's still going to be down a little bit, we're starting to see a big turnaround. And, a lot of this is going to be driven by artificial intelligence and AI. One of the analysts for KeyBank Capital Markets came out about a week or so ago, and he believes that ChatGPT, that alone, that they spent about $100 million on NVIDIA GPUs to train the transformer language. That's pretty impressive number. And again, we're still in the very early stages. So we could definitely see that number increase dramatically in the future. And the CEO of NVIDIA came out also during the earnings call and said that the AI market is, quote unquote, at an inflection point, and that NVIDIA is essentially the operating system for AI systems today. And of course, that helped NVIDIA rally about 14% the day after that number came out. So NVIDIA definitely getting a lot of play here. They recently came out with a new GPU. It's called the RTX 4080. The other one was RTX 3080. And the issue they had is GPU market hit 20-year sales low in the third quarter of 2022. So, 3 quarters ago. And that's why you saw the profit margins really dip in this stuff, because I think you're going to see them cut some prices. And if you cut prices, obviously profit margin does fall from there. Keep in mind, though, they also, part of this GPU division is they provide what's called systems on a chip. They're called SoCs. They use that for Nintendo Switch. Nintendo Switch might go down as one of the best-selling game consoles ever. I mean, it's sold over 100 million, if I'm not mistaken. I think just 20 million again in the last 12 months. And it's been out for 6 years now. So that's been a huge, huge winner for them. But they are expected to come out with a new version, most likely end of 2023, 2024. And if Nvidia is part of that, which they likely will be, and if Switch, the successor to the current Switch, is a big winner, which I think it probably will be another big boost to Nvidia on top of the potential AI that they have going forward as well. So, yeah, I mean, these stocks got hit last year, though, because you had less demand after the pandemic. You had a huge gaming boom during the pandemic. Everybody stuck home. We ran into inflation. That hurt things. We ran into a bear market in stocks. We had high valuations after the big boom that we had during the pandemic. So it was kind of the perfect storm to drive them down. But, down at 110, hindsight 2020, I wish I would have put every dollar I had into it. I'd be up 110% right now. I obviously did not. But, we come down like that, and the pendulum swings so far the other way. We're probably more like fair valued at this point, to be honest with you. But I still think that there is big upside for both NVIDIA and AMD, which I'm going to get into in a second. But again, just to give you a little idea of the big difference between AMD and NVIDIA. NVIDIA chips tend to be a little more powerful, used for a little bit high-end situations, where AMD is going to offer you a little bit better value, lower price points that, again, not as high performance as the NVIDIA chips. So that's kind of the big difference that you're going to see between the two. Also, if we take a look at market share. So during the third quarter of 2022, AMD had 16% market share in what they call the discrete GPU market. Meanwhile, NVIDIA had 72% market share in that same quarter. So much, much bigger market share at this time. As I mentioned, NVIDIA supplies the SoC, system on chips, to the Switch for Nintendo. AMD provides the SoCs to Sony's PlayStation 5 and Microsoft's Xbox Series XS, both consoles as well. So they have a bit of a buffer because they're dealing with two companies, not just Nintendo, where if new Switch isn't popular, that could hurt NVIDIA. It could really help them at that time. So a little bit different companies, still playing off really the same big picture thing here. And again, a lot of the future will rely on another kind of a rebirth in gaming, which I think will happen, as well as the future of artificial intelligence, which I think will drive both these companies as well. So if I take a look at AMD, let's take a look at AMD's chart here real quick before we kind of jump into the financials for you. And what we're going to see here is a pretty similar chart to what we saw with NVIDIA, which should pull up here in a second. We topped out here back in November 2021, early December 2021, about 165 a share, came all the way down to 55. We're up to 90. We're about 79 right now. So it hasn't really rallied as much as NVIDIA off the low. What I do like, though, is we broke a downtrend, and we have a clear uptrend that started in October. You have higher highs, you have higher lows. It's near the low end of the range, around 75. Boy, it looks fantastic. If that continues, that means we probably run in 95 to 97. So I think there's really nice upside here potential for AMD. And as I mentioned, it does trade at a different valuation, which I'll talk about here in a minute. Looking for revenues to go to about $31.3 billion in 2025 on almost $3 per share in the same year of earnings. Their top line is expected to grow about 9.3%, so a little less. That being said, earnings are expected to grow by nearly 30%. Your forward PE ratio is 18. Again, much lower than NVIDIA, which I mentioned was up at 53. future price of sales, forward price of sales of AMD 4.6 versus Nvidia, which was 16. So much different valuation. I like Nvidia as a better company. I think they have the data centers, the GPUs, the AI, cryptocurrency ever comes back, the automotive, which is only about 2% of revenues right now. I think it's still a big upside there. A little more diverse, in their hands, a little more, a couple more things. And I think when it comes to AI, they will be the leader, head and shoulders above AMD and the rest. That being said, on the earnings call that just came out recently, the CEO for AMD, Lisa Su, she was adamant that AI is going to be a growth driver for AMD in the next couple of years. And she also came out and said that it's more of a 2024 and beyond story, which I think so too. It's just kind of hitting the headlines now. It's a great topic, but you really won't see a lot of that money kind of flow in until 2024 and throughout the rest of the decade too. It's not all going to happen at once. So AMD, of course, a bit cheaper. As I mentioned, they have the system on chips for Sony and for Microsoft. They also provide CPUs for consumer and gaming enthusiasts. They have a new chip called the Ryzen, RYZEN 7000 series of CPUs. That's their biggest new product that they've released in that area since 2017. And it's sort of a kind of a new platform they're putting out that will be supported until 2025. They are, I think NVIDIA is a little more diversified, but in AMD is more diversified within the gaming industry because, again, it has both Sony and Microsoft versus just Nintendo that NVIDIA relies on. So let's take a look at Intel quickly. I don't want to get too much into Intel, but when it comes to Intel, it had its run. I'm not really looking to look at Intel. I don't like the fact that it cut its dividend recently. I think that's a bit concerning for me. But again, let's take a look at the chart and we'll show you what we can see with Intel. And here's a chart of Intel, folks. As you can see, it's down at a level now where it's what they call a triple bottom. October, December here. And a lot of sell-off in the last week or so to do with the dividend being cut. Obviously, you have NVIDIA up over 110% from the low. You have AMD up about 70% from the low. And we have Intel on the low. And if I zoom out a little bit more, it's going to show you kind of a bigger picture of just kind of where we stand. I have to go way out here. If we break below kind of this 25 area, you're going to be down a level below that 2015 low, down at an area of early 2014. So about a 9-year low. So again, that's a stock that, it may look a lot cheaper on paper. As I mentioned, its revenue is about to come in at $65.25 billion, up by 2025, $1.93 by 2025. Top line's only growing 1.9% annually, expected to. Bottom line is expected to grow by 11.5%. So you say, wow, that's okay. You got a forward PE ratio of 13.5. You got a forward price sales of 1.76. Cheap. Sometimes stocks are cheap for a reason. I think Intel's cheap for a reason. Just cut the dividend. That's a big concern of mine. And when it comes to AI, they're not huge players in this. They're not the Nvidias. They're not the AMDs of the world. And I've done a market matchup of these two stocks in the past a few months ago. And I don't really want to call this a market matchup. This is more kind of an outlook of where I think you should be positioning yourself within the semiconductors when it comes to the future of artificial intelligence. And I like both. And the good thing is there's not a gun to my head having me pick one of these three or two of the three or whatever it might be. I think you have to, if you believe in this, the future of AI, and you believe that the GPU and the chip makers are going to be part of it, believe data centers are going to continue to do well. I think gaming is going to have another kind of rebirth in the next couple of years. Then I think you want to own AMD and Nvidia. And I know it might be a way of kind of getting away from giving you an answer, but my only thing here is to educate you, have some fun, and then help you make money. And I'm saying I don't own either one. If I were to own these, and I said I want to get into this, I would put half in each. I think that's the best way to do it. Treat it as one position, put half in each. And I think you're probably going to do very well with both. But one will outperform. I don't know which one that is. Is it NVIDIA because I think it's a clear leader? Or is it AMD because it's a little bit more fairly valued here and will catch up to NVIDIA? I can make a case for both, to be honest with you folks. But honestly, at the end of the day, I think these are two stocks that are going to be core pillars of the future of artificial intelligence, the future of innovation, the future of technology. And they already have been for a decade plus. And I don't think they're going anywhere anytime soon. As I mentioned, Intel's about a $560 billion company. I think it's $1 trillion company in the next couple of years. AMD would have to go about 8 or 9x to get there. I don't see that happening anytime soon. But I do see it potentially being a $500 billion company at some point and going up 3x in the next several years. So I think there is huge upside for both these companies. And I think if you want to gain exposure, it's both. But again, nothing here is ever a buy or sell recommendation. This is pure education. And of course, I want you to make money, but we're here to educate you, have some fun, and sound smarter next time you're sitting at a cocktail party, because now you know which stocks to buy to play the AI revolution and ChatGPT. All right, folks, thank you so much for joining me. I hope you enjoyed the show. I'm Matt McCall, and that was Making Money.
Opinions expressed on this program are solely those of the contributor and do not necessarily reflect the opinions of Stansberry Research, its parent company, or affiliates.